This is Bryce Burge, host of Your Soccer Passport. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is John Lauder, host of The Cheap Seats here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, The Cheap Seats, where we talk about sports from the fans' perspective. A new show comes out every Monday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of The Cheap Seats. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
The latest headlines.
The Houston Astros, the defending World Series champions, got better adding Garrett Cole.
The insightful interviews.
Rick Saratella, NFL Draft Bible. With how much emphasis is put on the position, yet how many over the last couple of years we've had questions. Why do we put such an emphasis on drafting a quarterback number one overall?
The bottom line is there's not enough good quarterbacks to go around. And I think with the new CBA, it's really a low-risk gamble now. If you look at the playoff teams, the common denominator, good quarterback play.
The hottest takes.
I think the guy to blame is the one guy who hasn't left yet. I think Russell Westbrook is one of the bigger problems in Oklahoma City.
Can all be found on Press Row. Broadcasting is part of the Public House Media Network. Here's your host.
It doesn't matter what your name is.
Christian Heimel.
Welcome in once again on Press Row. Broadcasting is part of the Public House Media Network. Christian Heimel here with you as we are each and every week on this Thursday, September 20th, 2018. We are just 10 days away from the regular season of Major League Baseball coming to a close. That's right, less than 2 weeks, almost in single digits for regular season, which means the playoff race is heating up something fierce, and it is no better and no more exciting. I told you guys about this last week, but it is no more exciting than what is happening in the National League, specifically the National League wild card race. The National League West and Central divisions are so exciting, so entertaining. It's going to come down to the final weekend of the year, as it should every single year. I mean, that's kind of one of the best parts about Major League Baseball, is that you have this where it can come down to the final weekend. It can come down to teams that aren't even involved playing a role in it. I mean, looking at the standings, the Red Sox with the AL East wrapped up. You look at the Indians with the AL Central. The AL West isn't even as exciting as it was just 3 weeks ago when the Oakland Athletics were right there fighting with the Houston Astros. I mean, what's more exciting now is, can the Rays really get in there and make things interesting? They just had a big sweep here in this midweek series with Texas that continues to make things interesting. They've won 5 in a row now, 8 of their last 10. They're excited. They might actually make the playoffs. The Tampa Bay Rays, who have traded everybody and their sister away this season, might actually make the playoffs. They could make that run, especially when you look at the schedule that the Rays have coming up. I mean, with a big, massive sweep over Texas in this midweek series that they had this weekend, Tampa Bay starting tonight, a 4-game set in Toronto, and then 4 games against the Yankees and 3 games against the Blue Jays to close things out. There's a legitimate chance that the Rays could somehow get into the playoffs and knock either Oakland or the Yankees out. It's insane to think that. They're just 5 games out of the wild card right now. But that's really the only interesting part in the American League. Everything else is pretty much figured out. And a lot of that is because you've got the 3 best teams in baseball, and the Red Sox, the Astros, and the Indians, all right there in the American League. The National League is where it gets weird and where it gets wonky. The Atlanta Braves have seemingly pulled away in the NL East. The NL Central, the Cubs are still keeping Milwaukee at arm's reach. The Dodgers have the Rockies to deal with, even though they just had a great series at home this past week against Colorado. The Diamondbacks are right there inching around to make things interesting in the wild card. In the NL wild card race, you are going to have multiple teams that are right there missing the playoffs. You're going to have either, you get 2 spots for Milwaukee, St. Louis, Colorado, Arizona, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, the Nationals. All of those teams, those 7 teams, are within 7 games of the wild card. That's insane. It's so exciting, the National League wild card. And one of the teams that's really not getting a lot of coverage and this is maybe, it's kind of weird when you look at it. The National League doesn't have great markets. They've got New York with the Mets, Chicago with the Cubs, and LA with the Dodgers. But outside of that, the National League doesn't have many great media markets, so you don't get to see a lot of these teams, a bunch. You don't get to see Milwaukee that much. You don't get to see St. Louis. You really don't get to see Arizona at all. Philadelphia, unless they're good, not really. But a team that maybe gets overlooked more than anybody is the Colorado Rockies. And somehow, not only are the Rockies right there for the playoffs, but they got guys right there for the Cy Young in Kyle Freeland and the MVP, 2 guys in Trevor Story and Nolan Arenado. And we're going to talk with Drew Creasman, who covers the Rockies for BSN Denver. He's going to join us in just a little bit. But, I mean, when you look at this Colorado team, it's impressive. It's insane what they've done. I mean, you look at guys like Nolan Arenado, guys like Trevor Story, DJ LeMahieu. You look at their pitchers in Kyle Freeland. You look at Anderson, who's there as well. I mean, there are so many guys. Who else is there? Herman Marquez is right there. Johnny Gray. I mean, they've got some great talent on this roster. It's impressive to watch. I mean, it's so much fun. And then when you look at, the major leagues, the National League, I should say, you've got guys like a Trevor Story, like a Nolan Arenado, who are just absolute studs. I mean, Nolan Arenado, 2nd in the league in homers, 3rd in the league in RBI. He's right up there in terms of batting average at 295. He's definitely one of those guys that should be considered the MVP. Now, me personally, if I had a vote, I'm giving it to Javi Baez. I mean, Nolan Arenado plays tremendous defense. He's an all-world third baseman. Great, can hit right around 300, 30 home runs, 100 RBIs. Javi Baez, though, the one thing that I have for Javi is he's got more doubles, he's got more triples, and he's got a bunch more stolen bases. And he plays multiple positions. He can play second. He can play short. He can play third for the Cubs. And he has had to do that all this year. But that's not to say that Nolan Arenado isn't phenomenal. It's not to say Trevor Story, who's got 40 doubles, 30 home runs, 100 RBIs, 25 stolen bases, the first shortstop ever with 40 doubles, 30 homers, and 25 stolen bases. It's unbelievable. It's amazing to watch. So we're going to talk with Drew Creasman about that in just a little bit. But one other thing I do want to mention, it's amazing how dominant the Red Sox are, yet they had to wait till this week to really kind of officially wrap things up in the American League East. And that is because of just how dominant the Indians have been in the AL Central. And we're not talking about them because they don't have a 20-game winning streak and they play in Cleveland again. But they've got guys like Jose Ramirez, like Francisco Lindor, maybe the best left side of the infield in baseball right now, maybe the best of all time, potentially, when all is said and done. Jose Ramirez is a legitimate MVP caliber player. Francisco Lindor is probably the best shortstop in the game right now defensively. But what they're doing and what made them so great last year and what made it so surprising when they didn't win last year was their pitching. You look at their pitching this year, and after Mike Clevenger last night, who, again, was great, Trevor Bauer, Carlos Carrasco, Corey Kluber, and Mike Clevenger, each with over 200 strikeouts. It's the first time in Major League history 4 pitchers have punched out over 200 batters in one season. Rajai Davis, Francisco Lindor, Jose Ramirez, each with 20 steals on the year. The last time that happened for the Indians would have 3 players with 20 steals or more: Roberto Alomar, Kenny Lofton, Omar Vizquel in 2000. This Indians team is impressive. It's insane. As soon as Mike Clevenger gets to 200 strikeouts, this team is going to make history that's never been seen before in Major League Baseball. Never. And that, I think, it helps that the Central is just god-awful, terrible. But how exciting is it that the Cleveland Indians, who nobody's talking about, and don't get me wrong, I'm a huge, you guys know this, I'm a Red Sox fan, but with the injuries to Chris Sale, how bad the back end of the bullpen is, and that middle relief is very suspect with the Red Sox. Mookie Betts just came off the disabled list last night as a DH. The Indians might be the favorite in the American League, and therefore might be the favorite to win the World Series. But we'll wait and see how all that happens. When we return from break, Drew Creasman, BSN Denver, he's going to join us, talk the Colorado Rockies. This is a team that, honestly, I didn't even have on my radar for a possible postseason. And yet, MVP seasons from Trevor Story and Nolan Arenado, a potential Cy Young. He'll make the case for Kyle Freeland to be the Cy Young Award winner. He's got an ERA of like 2.2 something, but he just had a hell of a duel with Clayton Kershaw the other night. So, what's it going to take for the Rockies to make the postseason? What's gotten them this far? We'll find out from Drew Creasman. It's coming up a little bit. Your questions as well, all coming up. You're on Press Row, broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network.
Want to be part of the show? Go to Facebook and search Press Row Podcast Public House Media, or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Press Row PHM. You can also email the program, pressrowphm@gmail.com.
I'm the Greg.
And I am Dave Show.
We host the Greg and Dave Show on Public House Media.
Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out our show, The Greg and Dave Show, where we talk about strange, bizarre, and sometimes just downright quirky news stories that you may not have heard about.
A new show comes out every Wednesday. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes. And hey, thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Back on Press Row, Christian Heimel here with you, broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network. And one of the most exciting races in the postseason push for Major League Baseball has to be in the NL West, the Colorado Rockies and the Dodgers finishing up a midweek series. And to help us talk a little bit more about it and the Rockies' chances, Drew Creasman of BSN Denver joins us here on the program. Drew, thanks a lot for the time.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, and real quick, before we get into all the nuts and bolts of what's going on the field, a little bit of a scary moment, but I guess Rockies fans shouldn't be too concerned with Trevor Story.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. You're concerned anytime an MVP candidate, one of the best players on the team, arguably the guy who's been having the best season the entire year for the Colorado Rockies, has an injury thing. The timing of it's still not great if he's going to miss 2 of the 3 of this Dodgers series, which may end up be what determines, who goes to the postseason. But all that said, the much better news, it sounds like he's going to be back in a couple of days. In fact, when I get down to talk to Bud Black here in a couple hours, my first question is going to be, is he even available to pinch hit tonight? And I'm guessing the answer to that question will be yes.
What's this season been like? Because, heading into the year with J.D. Martinez leaving Arizona, with the Dodgers seemingly retooling a little bit, it seemed as though Colorado was almost, at least outside of, Denver, kind of the forgotten child in the NL West. But what's been the key to success this year?
It's the strangest thing that anyone outside or inside of the Colorado Rockies can hear, but it's been the starting pitching. The bugaboo of the entire franchise for the 25 years they've been in existence. They've never pitched well, really, until starting last year. And it's this group of young guys, all of whom came up through the organization. None of their starters have ever pitched for anybody else. And I think, to me, the most insane and impressive stat about the 2018 Colorado Rockies is that they have had 6 starting pitchers pitch all but 1 of their games, which is just craziness to me. And they've been very good. There's been some faltering here and there. I believe that Kyle Freeland should be a legitimate Cy Young candidate when you take into consideration Coors Field. And their defense has also been off the charts. It doesn't maybe get as much talk as it should, but they're set to break their own franchise mark set in 2007 for fielding percentage. Everybody knows Arenado and Story, but LeMahieu can pick it. A lot of great athletes out there, because this is not a particularly good offensive team, it's really come down to those two things.
You know, it's weird that you mentioned that because I've seen both you and a couple of your other colleagues out there in Denver, mainly Patrick Saunders with the Denver Post, talking about Kyle Freeland as a Cy Young candidate. What about him has been so dominant and is allowing people to think? I mean, there was even a headline a couple weeks ago, his 2.21 ERA at Coors is like a 1.12 ERA in Dodger Stadium.
Well, exactly right. And that's the craziest thing is he's been better at Coors Field than he is anywhere else. And he insists that it's because he loves pitching in Denver. Obviously, he's from Denver. He grew up, went to high school about 10 blocks from where Coors Field is. He says he likes the way his pitches move in altitude. He's the one guy. I've been watching this team for 25 years. I've been covering him for 6. He's the only guy I've heard come out and say, I view Coors Field not just like I'm fine here, but as an advantage. He believes he has an advantage when he steps out there. And the thing that blows me away most about Kyle Freeland is his consistency. I have the worst nickname in the world for him. I call him Quality Start Kyle, but which is just awful to say. But at the same time, it's true. The guy just doesn't get blown up. When he doesn't have it, he'll go 5 innings, give up 3 runs. He's only got 1 outing in his career where he gave up 7 runs. Everything else has been, and like that's what's the craziest to me is he just doesn't, every other Rockies pitcher is an up and down roller coaster ride of emotions every single season. He's been the steadiest guy since the beginning of last year who's ever pitched in a Rockies uniform that I have ever seen.
He's on my fantasy team, so I love him personally. But I'm sure he appreciates the nickname. We're speaking with Drew Creasman of BSN Denver, talking Colorado Rockies here. They're a team that's just now sitting just a little outside this wild card race, and if they're able to get there, if they don't get to the division with the Dodgers, they would have to probably go on the road for that wild card game. But how strange is this that one of these teams, the Dodgers, the Rockies, the Diamondbacks, the Cardinals, the Brewers, multiple of those teams are going to miss the playoffs?
Yeah, so there are going to be some fan bases out there that are feeling pretty frustrated and pretty disappointed when they've been in it all season. The National League has been crazy this year. I love it. I love these tight races. I was saying just the other day, man, the Rockies could miss the postseason altogether, or they could win the National League. The Cubs haven't even totally run out. Now we're getting down to these last 11 games. That's very unlikely. But about a week ago, that wasn't an insane proposition that the Rockies would actually have a home field postseason series. And you're right, now it seems like they're fighting just to go on the road for a wild card game. But there's a lot of really good teams out there. You mentioned the Cardinals, Brewers, the Dodgers. The Diamondbacks have really faded here, but they've been a well-run, well-managed team out there for a little while. Shelby Miller trade notwithstanding. And it's been a really tight division. Last year, all 3 of those teams from the NLS, the Dodgers, Diamondbacks, and Rockies, made the postseason. So, but that's why you play the games, right? That's what we want to see is the very best at the best playing with stakes. And we've got 11 more games, and everyone's playing for something.
There's not a lot left in terms of the division after this weekend with Arizona, but with that series being on the road, how crucial is this weekend to the Rockies postseason?
It's very crucial. It's not as crucial as I thought it was going to be with those guys fading out there a little bit, but the biggest thing is just winning the games in front of them now. The Rockies with the lost night in extras, just a brutal loss. Freeland went toe-to-toe with Clayton Kershaw. Looked like they had a chance to win it, some tough breaks, but with that, the old phrase applies, their destiny is no longer in their own hands. In order to beat the Dodgers for the division, they're going to need someone else to go get them, but they've got to take care of business in front of them. They've got that series against the Diamondbacks, and then it's not an easy finish with the Phillies and the Nationals, who may not be playing for much, but they're not just going to lay down either. So it's a big one coming up here against, and the Diamondbacks and Rockies rivalry to me is the least, it should be talked about a lot more. They share a spring training facility. They play each other all the time. They know each other really well. That wild card game last year was crazy. There is zero chance the Arizona Diamondbacks are going to lay down for the Colorado Rockies.
Drew Creasman of BSN Denver joining us here on Press Row talking Rockies. And we talked a little bit about Kyle Freeland and his Cy Young candidacy, but there's a guy who I've kind of been on his train for a couple of months now, in Nolan Arenado for the MVP. I know a lot of people, even myself at the All-Star break, said Javi Baez, but what about Nolan Arenado? And I know Trevor Story's in there as well, but what about Arenado has made him one of the best players in the league?
I think the thing that's difficult for people that don't watch Nolan play every day is like his stats can tell you his offense pretty well. He's a good clutch hitter. That's why he's got his 5th straight season, or 4th maybe, with 100 straight, with 100 RBI, 30 home runs, that kind of stuff. What's hard, and people know he's a great defender. I don't think anyone's confused about his defensive capabilities, but he breaks the defensive scale. He's so good defensively that I think he gets underrated because people just go, he's the best defensive third baseman in the game. Like, true, but he's also maybe the best defensive third baseman of a generation. Or maybe, according to Brooks Robinson, the best defensive third baseman ever. And when you're in that category, when you're a guy who is the best ever at something and you're currently playing, it's tough to put that into the MVP conversation. You know, it's like, hey, he's hit about 300, 30 home runs, 100 RBI. And oh, by the way, platinum gold glove or platinum glove every year. That I think is the biggest thing that people don't realize how much of an impact he can have on a game by doing things defensively that we just haven't even seen before.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's fun to watch this team with guys like LeMahieu and Story and Arenado and their pitching staff. But there was a story that, and maybe not even a story, but a little nugget about this Rockies team that I love. And that was a little bit before Players Weekend when, you know, fan favorite and all-time Rocky Matt Holliday is back in the big league club. And has continued that and wearing the I Touched Home jersey during Players Weekend. What was it like when he returned to Denver, and what's it been like this stretch here with a guy who really helped put Colorado back on the map in the mid-2000s?
It's been awesome. It's been the word that I asked Cargo about playing in the clubhouse with the guy he was traded for. His word was, it's been surreal, and that's what it's been for everybody involved. I think it's really been, it's those kind of things you like. If they scripted this, no one would believe it. He gets a standing ovation every time he comes to the plate at Coors Field. People know what he's meant to the franchise. He's been a great member of that clubhouse. I was talking to Nolan Arenado the other day. He said there's practically a line to his locker. Guys asking him about this or that. Pitchers want to know, how would you approach me? Hitters want to know, well, how can I do what you're doing? I watched him take batting practice last week. It was practically a religious experience. The guy's playing pepper with the concourse at 38 years old. He's still built like a truck. And, yeah, one of the most important members of this franchise ever. So to see it all kind of come full circle, he's probably going to finish out his career as a Rocky, to get to pass on that wisdom to all these guys. There's everything about it is awesome.
Well, and we appreciate this run that they're on, too, because it makes it that much more fun. Drew, thanks so much for the time, and best of luck here with Arizona coming up this weekend and the rest of the way.
Thanks, Christian. Absolutely appreciate it, man.
All right, it's Drew Creasman, BSN Denver, and I mean, again, you know, this Rockies team it's impressive, you know, and I love Matt Holliday. He was one of my favorite guys ever, so I'm happy to see him doing well, and again, the Rockies playing well, so should be fun. And listen, I mean, it'd be great to see them in the postseason, but they got a pretty big series and a pretty big finish coming up down the stretch here with the Colorado Rockies. We'll get to your listener questions when we return. And I'm sorry, but like a lot of you guys are really just kind of annoying me with some of the comments we got about the New York Giants. I'll get to that coming up after the break. You're on Press Row, broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network.
Listen to every episode and get the latest shows sent right to you. Subscribe to Press Row on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher.com. Or visit us online at www.thephmedia.com.
This is Daniel Poppy, host of How to Write Good here on Public House Media. I just want to thank you for listening to the following broadcast brought to you by Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope that you'll come check out my show, How to Write Good, the writing show that is not about writing. A new show of How to Write Good comes out every Wednesday, so don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of How to Write Good. Again, thanks for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Welcome back on Press Row. Christian Alman here with you. Don't forget you can follow the show on social media and submit questions throughout the week. Twitter and Instagram handle at PressRowPHM. Find us on Facebook, Press Row Podcast by Public House Media. You can also email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com. Find me on Twitter if you'd like. Chris Heimel, ChrisHeimall. Get your listener questions. First and foremost, Matt in Maryland. What can the Patriots do to turn Josh Gordon around? Look, if anybody's going to do it, it's Bill Belichick, and here's how you turn him around. You bring him into the office. Bill Belichick puts on, a ring on each hand and shows it to him. You want one of these? Clean up your act. It's that simple. I mean, I really thought the Patriots were going to go after Des Bryant. It just felt like that kind of move, but this feels very Patriots-esque too. I mean, Corey Dillon, Randy Moss, Chad Johnson, a number of other guys who have had their own personal issues, whether it be on the field or off the field, they bring them in and they reach the promised land. Now, I know Randy Moss didn't win a Super Bowl. I know Chad Johnson didn't either, but they were model citizens under the Patriots way. And that's kind of what that atmosphere does. That's what that atmosphere teaches you is, listen, it's bigger than you. It's part of the team. And as long as you buy into that concept, we're going to win. We're going to go places. And I think, honestly, Josh Gordon might be the missing piece for this Patriots team. They don't have a running game. Their offensive line was pilfered in free agency. And without Julian Edelman, it's clear to see they don't have a separation receiver. And Edelman's not really that anyway. But Josh Gordon's a deep threat. Tom Brady is the best of all time. Bill Belichick is the best of all time. And Josh Gordon has incredible talent that will certainly help in that sense. It certainly will. It will be a lot of fun to watch this. I'm excited to see what happens as early as this week. I don't know if he plays this week, but, it's amazing to think that it just took a fifth-round draft pick when the Patriots traded Brandon Cooks for a first-round draft pick because they felt like they didn't need that receiver, and now they do. And they got it back for a fifth-round pick. That's unbelievable. That's insane. Psycho. Josh wants to know thoughts on Vontae Davis. It's embarrassing. It really is. It's absolutely embarrassing. Vontae Davis, who, for those of you who don't know, signed with the Buffalo Bills this offseason, 1 year, $5 million, $3.5 million guaranteed, and at halftime with his team trailing by like 20, just changes into street clothes and walks out. He had an article on The Undefeated earlier this week, if you had a chance to see it. He sits down on the bench after a series and goes, "I'm done," to his defensive backs coach, John Butler. Coach didn't reply. There was only 47 seconds left. He didn't go on the field for those two, meaningless plays that they had. And then he said, in this article on The Undefeated, "I didn't feel right. I didn't feel myself." But he was still playing well. I mean, listen, you have to understand the fact that even if it's not for you, even if you feel like you're done, and he said that, like, I just felt my body didn't feel like I could continue to perform. He didn't feel like he was supposed to be on that field. He didn't belong there. That's fine. Finish out the game. You don't have to play. Just go and stand on the sideline, because it looks a lot worse just walking out and quitting on your team than it does standing there on the sideline and people speculating whether it's an injury or something like that. We can make it up. Make it up for the half. Just say, he's got a leg injury. We're going to keep an eye on it, but he's questionable to return. And then afterwards, you say, I don't belong out on the field. My body didn't feel like it, and I think it's time to call it quits. And you address the guys in the locker room. I don't care if you'd only played for the Bills for 2 weeks, really a week and a half. It's embarrassing. You never do that. You show, and Vontae Davis, who was a very good player in Indianapolis for 10 years, this is his legacy now. And if he's okay with it, that's on him. But it really is. It's just honestly embarrassing. It really is. Brandon wants to know, does preseason hockey chalk up to the unimportance of preseason football? No, because I think preseason hockey, and this is why hockey and baseball are a little bit different, because you have a minor league system where you want to know what you have there. Football, you got the practice squad, which you can get every single week. Basketball, the G League isn't really important to anybody just yet. Hopefully it gets that way, but it's not right now. So I mean, preseason hockey is a little bit more important just because you do have those minor league farm teams that you want to try and see what you have. You want to get your draft picks up to NHL speed. And, I mean, it's a little bit more important because you got more talent to evaluate. In the NFL, you pretty much know who your starters are going to be before preseason begins. And the fact that most of the starters don't actually play doesn't help the fact that it's not important, you know? So I think preseason hockey is a little bit more important there. All right, last one here. Matt in Pittsburgh. Should Mike Tomlin be on the hot seat after the Antonio Brown? Yes. I'm not even going to finish reading the question. Yes, Mike Tomlin should be on the hot seat. It's embarrassing. I'm sorry, but Mike Tomlin is the most overrated coach in the NFL right now. And I know that's saying a lot because of Jason Garrett and because of a couple of others, John Gruden, whoever, McVay up there in Buffalo. But Mike Tomlin, I'm sorry. You've got 3 Hall of Famers on your team. Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, and Ben Roethlisberger, and you can't figure out this locker room. You want to know why the Patriots are the best of all time? It's because they have leaders, and their leader is not only their quarterback. It's not only guys in the defensive side, but it's their head coach. And leadership is everything, and it comes from the head coach. It starts there. Chuck Noll, Bill Belichick, Bill Cowher, Tony Dungy, Mike Ditka, Tom Landry, Bill Parcells. Those guys were leaders. John Madden. They figured it out. Phil Jackson, John Wooden. You want me to keep going? These are professional coaches, John Wooden excluded, professional coaches who were able to manage egos and were able to figure it out and treat their athletes like men, but hold them to that kind of standard of being an adult. And what Antonio Brown did, and I'm sorry, but Mike Tomlin coming out and saying there was a discipline, there's discipline assessed. No, there wasn't, because guess what? Antonio Brown's going to play. If there was really discipline and that was your team, you'd bench Antonio Brown this weekend. Against a team that you're going to lose to even with Antonio Brown, you'd bench him. You would. You'd reach out to Le'Veon Bell and figure out what's it going to take for us to get you here. You'd be a leader. And Mike Tomlin isn't that. So yes, I'm sorry, but if the Steelers miss the playoffs this year, which they actually might because Mike Tomlin doesn't know how to manage his team and manage these egos, he should be fired. He should be. It's that simple. He's been around too long and hasn't won enough with that caliber of talent. It's just my opinion. And, if you don't like it, come at me on Twitter, at Chris Heimel, ChrisHeimall. You can also tweet the show at PressRowPHM. Find us on Instagram as well, at PressRowPHM. Press Row Podcast by Public House Media. That is the Facebook page, or you can email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com. Last thing I want to get to, look, it's been an issue of mine for the first 2 weeks of the NFL season, and I hate overreactions, and a lot of people do it. But one of the biggest ones that the Giants are going to regret for the next 15 years not drafting Sam Darnold and taking Saquon Barkley instead. No, they're not. The reason why the Giants are going to regret taking Saquon Barkley at number 2 is because they could have taken Quentin Nelson and improved the offensive line. Eli Manning's completion percentage right now is near 70%. It's one of the best in his career. Eli Manning is having from a completion percentage standpoint, one of the best in his career. His completion percentage for his career is under 60%. He is 10% higher than that right now. Right now. Through 2 games. Now, he's only got 500 passing yards, but that is because his offensive line isn't giving him enough time to go through his reads. He's got to dump it off to Saquon Barkley. It doesn't give his receivers like Odell Beckham, like Evan Ingram, to get down the field and get separation. If they had an actual offensive line that blocked and gave him time and gave his players time, his wide receivers time, he'd have more passing yards and more touchdowns. But that game against the Cowboys, 33 for 44 for 279 yards and 1 touchdown. 279 yards is not enough for 44 passes, 33 completions. Like, that's insane to think that. But it's the offensive line. It's not Eli Manning. And it's not the fact that they don't have... Sam Darnold wouldn't be able to do a damn thing with this offensive line. He wouldn't. But because Eli Manning has been around for so long, he is able to go through the checkdowns and go through the reads and has that quality running back to be able to check down all the time. That's what makes him better. So the Giants aren't going to regret not drafting Sam Darnold. They're going to regret not drafting Quentin Nelson and maybe going and getting a running back later in the draft, like a Sony Michel, like a Nick Chubb. You know, Le'Veon Bell was a third-round draft pick. Kareem Hunt was a fourth-round draft pick. I agree. They maybe didn't need to go to Saquon Barkley, but if you go back through the archives of this show, it's Quentin Nelson that they should have drafted. It is, and it's that simple. That's why the Giants will regret drafting Saquon Barkley. And who knows? Maybe Saquon proves everybody wrong. Maybe the Giants figure it out and they win 8 straight. Who knows? Maybe it starts this weekend. You never know. Big thanks to Drew Creasman of BSN Denver for joining us here on the podcast talking Colorado Rockies. Big series for them coming up this weekend in Arizona as they try to make the playoffs. Big thanks to you guys for submitting your questions and listening. As always, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find Press Row. Don't forget to head to thephmedia.com. Get yourself some awesome show gear. Go over to ESPN.com and join our Cheap Seats PHM Pick'em League. Head over to the Cheap Seats by Public House Media on Facebook to join that league there. As always, we appreciate you guys listening. We can't wait to have you next week. And until then, I'm Christian Imel. We'll see you on Press Row.